am Vero, and you're watching Modern Immigrant. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Modern Immigrant. Remember that we have new episodes every Monday. We took a little break last week, but we're back, and we're really excited to be sharing this immigration story with you all today. Before I introduce my guests, I want to remind you to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, or subscribe if you're listening to this podcast. We are available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else where you get your podcasts. Remember that you can also check our Instagram at Modern Immigrant and our website, modernimmigrant.net, where you can always reach out to us if you want to connect. My guest of the week is Yessi. Yessi is originally from Medellin, Colombia, and she moved to the US when she was a kid. And she's going to share with us her immigration story, the struggles of being an immigrant, the struggles of discovering her legal status, the struggles of having to go back to Colombia in order to figure everything out, in order to get everything in order and come back to the US. So we talk about that culture shock, the going back home. Yessi is also a first generation graduate student. And as she says that, to her, being a first generation graduate student means to be breaking barriers. And to me, that was beautiful. And she's gonna inspire you with this story. We also talk about what Yessi is currently doing, working at a tech company. And she went to school to study digital marketing, and we explore all the networking and how she had been able to accomplish so many amazing things in her life. We also talk about her amazing podcast, Bause Up, where she gives amazing tips and conversations with people that are pioneers in different areas, in different fields, that are also breaking barriers. So you do not want to miss that conversation, and you don't want to miss her podcast and her Instagram account. She's open to receive people checking in with her, and she's always available on her Instagram and email. So I'm gonna leave all of the information down below. If you want to connect with Yessi, please do it. The idea is to support each other and to grow this community where you are not alone. So thank you so much one more time for being here, and enjoy. Bye. And I'm really excited to have Yessi today here with us on Modern Immigrant. Yessi, welcome to Modern Immigrant.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Rita. I am so excited.
Me too. I'm really glad that we were able to connect. I am always really surprised about these connections and this conversation, because there's so much we can explore and talk about. So we already talked before, we chatted for a little bit, so I always come into the interviews excited about, because I know what's gonna happen. It's gonna be powerful.
Yeah. No worries. You are good.
So, Yessi, I always start every interview by asking my guests, when did their immigration story start? So you can put us a little in context and in place. How old were you? Where were you at? And that way we can, keep asking more things.
Well, thank you for having me on here. It's such an honor and opportunity to be on here and share my story. And I hope that my story impacts someone out there who might be going through something similar as well. So my immigration story started back when at that time I was a kid, and I didn't really know what was going on. When my parents did the petition to file me for permanent residency, unfortunately my dad got sick, and so he didn't have a job, so we didn't have the capacity for the amount of money to pay for immigration fees, because they are expensive. So my case got closed down, and then I think when I turned around 13, 14, around that age, was when I really started to know, like I was aware now, like what exactly was going behind the scenes of immigration. So I want to say it started from that age, but it has been, because I told you about this, the case, we finished it up last year in 2020, but it was a battle of 16 years. So so looking back, so like in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. But at the same time, it's kind of like time flies by that you don't notice it, but then when you look back at it, you're like, oh God. So it started around the age of 13, 14, when my parents redid the refile for it. there was a lot of contratiempos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that came up, and then this didn't make sense, the other, et cetera, et cetera. And then now I'm 18 years old, and at the time, for many people, it was like, getting your license at 16 and whatnot. And you were one of those people who, like, well, I can't get that because legally I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, I didn't have my social, or I wasn't under a legal status where I qualified for that. So that happened, and then I was eligible to apply for DACA, but at first I was undocumented.
Okay.
And so applying for DACA, that gave me like a open door to millions of opportunities, even
Mm-hmm.
though it's very limited, but it did give me an opportunity to work, to be able to get a driver's license, to be able to, do the things that legally what people would normally do. I became fully aware of it when I was like now 14, and I was
Mm.
like, oh, like this is what I didn't know I needed this in order to work. Oh, like I didn't know I needed that.
Right. But when they did that application, you were already in the US? Or that was like the
Yes.
plan to move? Okay.
No, so I came to the US, and then my dad filed the
I
petition
see.
for me. And then unfortunately, because my dad got sick and
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff, we weren't able to like get the cost like for immigration at the time. So
Right.
my case got closed down, and then they were able to reopen it again. But like now I was a little bit more older, and I was more aware of like what
Mm.
immigration was and what a social security meant, what it meant to
Exactly.
be,
And the
under a.
impact. Mm-hmm.
And so it takes a toll on your family if
Mm.
you or someone who is close to you has like a relative going through that. It takes an impact not just on yourself emotionally and mentally, but it also takes on your family as well, because
Mm.
your family has to be there. You have that support, but they also have to deal with like the uncertainty of the
Mm.
feeling of like you don't know what's going to happen, and that could happen to someone who's under undocumented, and that could happen to someone who's under DACA status, because even that
Mm.
we can see that they're trying to see what they can come up with a better solution for that. But even then, it's still that uncertain feeling that you feel like
Yeah.
what's going to happen,
Mm. And I'm glad that you're talking about that, because I feel like it's so important for people that might not understand the immigration system to know the impact that those, I don't even know how to call it, like that period of time that you're waiting, you're already having a life here in the USA.
Yeah,
As you said,
yeah.
you wanted to go to school, and I want to go over that in just a second, but trying to get a driver's license and just little things. So I want you to kind of walk us through what were some of the challenges or the things that you saw that were impacting your life because of your status, because that thing wasn't kind of completely resolved at that time.
So, I mean, I think one of the major blocks at the time, because I saw like a lot of my close friends at 16 were getting, their permit, they were, on transition to getting their license and all that. I was one of those people who like couldn't get it. And it was hard to share that because the people around me didn't really know exactly what that meant. Like, oh, what do you mean? Like, you can't, apply for a driver's license? Or like, I remember this because moving forward to school,
Mm.
I remember it was like my senior year, and it was like one of those things where it's like you're, as a senior, you're trying to figure out like what college you're going to go to, or like what's the next step that you're going to take after school, which to me, it was like I didn't think I had hope,
Mm.
because I was like at the time I didn't have a social security that was, valid or anything like that. Like I didn't have anything. So
Wow.
my counselor pulls me out of class, and she's like, hey, you haven't applied for any colleges. Like, what's going on? And I was like, my high school grades were so bad because I didn't feel that motivation from the beginning, because I was like, well, there's no hope. Like I can't go to college because one, my parents can't afford it. Two, it was like, well, they're asking for social security and I don't even have that yet. And I was still in the transition of trying to get DACA on there. So my counselor was like, there's actually a possibility for you to go to school. And I was like, no, there's not. Like I was over here being negative. She was the one being positive. She's like, no, Yessi, like, let's take a look. Like there's a list of schools that I know that are okay with this. And one of them ended up being a community college, which was like, for me, it was my best experience, because I was like, oh, I didn't know I had that opportunity.
How
And
amazing.
so, yeah. So then when I was able to apply for, a community college, I was also I got eligible, and it was kind of like a blessing in disguise, because at first, like, I
Mm.
wasn't working. I was doing internships, but I wasn't working.
Right.
And so I like was like, I have no idea what we're gonna do. My family was like, échale ganas, like we'll see what we can do and help you out. And it was kind of like we prayed, we gave it to God, and like a few days later, my school was like, "Hey, we want to pay for 2 of your semesters in college." And I was just like, "That's
What?
such a blessing in disguise," because I was like, I didn't know I was eligible for scholarships, and then
How crazy.
yeah, and so after getting my DACA status like now fixed, and I'm like, okay, now I'm under DACA, so now I can apply for scholarships. But even then, there goes a lot of hard work behind the scenes that people don't see, especially when you're under DACA status. Because as much as you apply for scholarships, you can't apply. You can't apply for FAFSA. You
That's
can't
it.
apply for.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up because I recently had that conversation with someone that didn't know the difference between DACA and not having DACA. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yes.
don't know if that's because I do know that a lot of the time people that do have DACA, they call themselves undocumented. Is that correct? Like, that's a way to,
I mean,
or not?
it's another way. I think it all really depends on the person how they want to identify themselves. When you are under DACA, you are under the status of protection to not get deported. That is something that came with the DACA, eligibility. It's also like you are allowed to have a social security. You are also allowed, to work in the United States without getting deportation. So it protects you from deportation, but it doesn't allow you. So if you go outside of the country, you're under DACA status, you are not eligible to come back in because of that. So there's a lot of things that even though you are under DACA status, it's like, oh yes, I have this, but then there's other things that are kind of blocked. So it makes it a little bit difficult if you are, trying to apply for scholarships, because not all scholarships are eligible for that, or trying to apply for FAFSA because FAFSA says if you have DACA, that's enough. So unfortunately, we couldn't apply for FAFSA. So I was like, okay, so like at the time I had DACA, so I was like, well, I'm gonna get a job. So I got a job. At first, it was kind of like a early childhood assistant type of thing. And that started opening like doors little by little, networking with people like, okay, what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do this? And it was still that feeling of uncertainty because it was like, well, I want to do this, but like, I don't know what my future holds.
And that's, wow. When you're sharing this, I'm just thinking about the impact because we have been talking for what? It's been like 11 minutes. And I know because I can relate to you because of the struggles with my visas and paper, that causes a lot of impact in your mental health. It can, right? And I think that's something that we briefly talked the first time we met. So I would love for you to bring some of that light to the ones that are listening because it does affect. And I want to hear how it was for you to kind of navigate the uncertainty, right? Like, okay, let me apply, but I don't know if I will get it. Okay, let me think about my future, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay here or access to this. So how do you think that has impacted your mental health in general?
If I'm being 100% honest with you, it impacted me a lot to the point where I felt like I didn't have I couldn't breathe, right? And it was something that I had to deal with every single day of my life until I went to Colombia and all that, but we'll get into that more later on. But it takes a lot I think you have to kind of accept it is what it is, but it's also like, no te encierres, no te encajes en solamente eso, right? Don't think that because you are under DACA, you don't have the possibilities of doing what somebody else does. And I always say, because my mom taught me this, like a legal status does not define a human being. What defines a human being is what you bring to the table. That's just the way how I see it and how I was kind of raised. It was like my parents were always like, it's what you bring to the table. You have talent, you have this, you have, the work, just do it. And I think also like the people that you surround yourself with says a lot about how you make your decisions and the kind of things that you want to apply for yourself. So if you surround yourself by negative people, what do you expect? But if you surround yourself by positive people or people who have something similar, such as you, like, hey, I want to work in this industry, because that was my story. Like, I wanted to work in social media and marketing and technology, but I was like, how do I get even started? I started reaching out to people and I was like, hey, like, do you mind if we just like chit chat on the phone? At the time, it was like on the phone. Now it's like texting and email and Zoom. But at the time, I was like, hey, like, I'm really interested in, like, I would connect with these people on LinkedIn, but they didn't know that I was under DACA status. They saw me like, you're a human being and you got this. And
Mm.
that's how I kind of started, like, in my way of working in my city, which is Chicago, because I was so like, I guess I was intimidated because I was like, oh, I'm underdog side, but I was like, in the back of my head, I'm like, but you're so much more than just a legal status, you know?
That's so
So I think
wonderful.
when you take a look at your situation, you gotta also understand, like, the situation you probably might be going through. It's a situation there for a reason. That's gonna help you. That's gonna
Mm.
mold you. That's gonna help you become the person that you need to be for tomorrow. Because the day of tomorrow, you never know what the future holds, and there could probably be a possibility or an opportunity for you to, get your green card. But if that's not the case,
Mm.
I think take what you have right now and use that, because that's your story. That's your power.
Yes.
That's what makes you unique. So
Hmm.
I think that for me, it was more of like, I had to realize, like, wait, this is my current situation. I can't do more than that, because immigration is more like, it's on our hands, not on your time. And
Right.
I was like, fine, I'm going to take my situation and I'm going to try to surround myself by people who have
Mm.
probably been similar to something like me, or people who are positive. And I started to do that. And I
Mm.
started to also rely as well, like mentorship. Like, I would recommend getting a mentor if you're
Yes.
depending on goals wise, like what you want to do, get a mentor, get
Mm.
somebody, and reach out to somebody that can actually kind of reflect and actually, hey, like, there's more to that.
And I love that you said this is something that I recently explored. I don't know if it was on Clubhouse or where, but somebody was just saying that how important it is to reach out to those people that you admire or they're doing
Yeah.
something similar that resonates with you, rather
Mhm.
than sometimes we look at that, and this is something for everyone. I feel like everyone can connect. We might look at that and say, oh, why her and not me? Why him and not me? Oh, they have been, and not to the, not in a negative way, but in like a, oh, they did it, they had a good luck and I just can't. And how different it is when we flip that behavior, that thought, as you did, and said, no, wait, I can do that too. Let me ask them how they did it. Let me ask them if they want to support me or mentor me or help me.
Yeah.
And I feel like we become so much strong, like way stronger that way. And yeah, I just feel it's wonderful what you're saying about not letting the status define you either. Really,
Yeah.
I know those are two big things, but I do think that we need to behave with all that we know we can do, as your parents told
Yeah.
you. I think that's beautiful. This is who you
No, thank
are,
you.
not a piece of paper that says that. It's so random to, like, today you can say something and tomorrow you can say another thing based on a thing that we can't even control, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
And I do want to ask you, what happened? Because I know it was important, that moment or that part of your life when you went back to Colombia. Why do you go? No, why? In the sense of course, why not, right? But did something happen that you had to go to Colombia? How was that experience after being in the U.S. for so long?
Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy.
I bet.
um, it was a roller coaster of emotions, I will say that. When I was in the process, even though I was under DACA status, and then, I reopened my case to get my permanent residency, immigration was like, okay, like, now you got to go back to Colombia to now get kind of like, it's kind of like a interview to the embassy to get your green card legally, in a way that they forgive you for, being illegal in
Mm-hmm.
the United States. So when we went to go do that, well, we were in the process, like, we were just waiting on immigration to just let us know, and I have to go out to Colombia. And at the same time, my lawyers were like, because I had really great attorneys, and I thank them so much, because they were the ones who were pushing it, and they were like just on it. And they really were like, hey, like, it'll possibly, not guaranteed, but it could possibly take 2 to 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay, like 2 to 3 weeks, that's okay. That's no big
I
deal,
can
right?
visit, have fun, right? Like that's
Right.
where the mind goes.
Right. Your mind goes like, oh, it's 2 to 3 weeks, because they already told you that.
Mm.
When I got to Colombia, and I had my interview, and it was great, there was just a few things that they were like, oh, hey, we still need this additional documents and stuff like that. And
Mm.
at the time, I was cool, calm, and collected. But then I started to notice that, like, no response, nada de bulla, todos
Nada. And
callados.
you were by
And
yourself with some family over
so
there, or?
so I went with my mom originally to Colombia, but my mom had to come back to the States, because within 2 weeks, like, her job was like, hey, we need you to come back. And I told my mom, I was like, just go back and it's fine. Like, I'll just stay with family because I do have family in Colombia.
Okay.
And I'm not gonna lie, the first month we didn't hear anything from them, and that was around November, December. And it was hard. It was
Mm.
hard. I think that was the worst month for me because I was under depression. I didn't want to go out. I just legit didn't want to eat. And
Wow.
my family in Colombia was like, no, you gotta, like, te tienes que animar, te tienes que, like, all this stuff. Like, they were trying to cheer me on because they knew of the situation, but it's
Yeah.
also kind of a culture shock to
Mm.
you,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you grew up in the States. Like, even though I am proud of being Colombian, like, I love my people, but like, I grew up in the States, and something that my uncle in Colombia taught me is like, never forget your roots, never forget from where you come from.
Mm.
And at the same time, to me, it was like selfishly, I was like, I get that, but I want to be back
Right.
in the States because I was so used to
And that's the
my life,
cultural shock. Like,
right?
it's going to
And
happen. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think after not being in Colombia for 20 years, because at the time I was like 23. And so I came to the States at 3. So I came to the States when I was 3, but then I didn't go back to Colombia after 20 years later. So
What were some
20 years.
examples? Like, can you put us in a little context? Like, what are some things that were like, okay, this is way different from what I was used to, or little
I
things that you miss?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, I think it's kind of funny because I was having this conversation a few days ago with a close friend too. And a lot of things, and this was my personal experience. I know everybody has a different experience, but my personal experience was like, there was so many people around everywhere. In the States, it's a little bit different. I mean, if you're in the city, then you'll be around people and stuff like that. But when you're in the suburbs and stuff like that, you're
Yeah.
so used to more of like everyone's on their own. But it was just more of like, you can kind of see like how, like, as much hard work it is to be in America, because it is like, it's
Hmm.
hard work. Like, you have to work your butt off in order to do what you want to do here in America, but it's triple harder when you do it outside of America because there's
Hmm.
more opportunities here, and you
Hmm.
don't see that much when you're in a different country, as such as like the States. So to me, it was like, there's no opportunities here. There's this. So I started
Hmm.
kind of just picking at myself because I was like, I was doing this back in Chicago. I was
Right.
meeting people here and there. And in Colombia, I was just more of like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, I felt kind of out of like lost because it was like, well, everyone here feels comfortable. I don't feel happy.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, one of the things, because I was living with my uncle and then I decided to move out of my uncle to go live with my other aunt. And, she was like more of like, I want you to get dressed up. I want you to feel good. I want you to feel pretty. And I was just like in a mental state of mind of like, I don't even feel like putting on makeup. And to me, it was just more of also the security. Like,
Mm.
you got to be very careful where you're going. Like, you
Yeah.
can't be going out with your phone and texting
Mm-mm.
or going out with your iPhone because people will look at you like, oh, she has an iPhone, she has money. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, it was more of like, I miss that in the States, even though like here, obviously, you'll still see here and there stuff, but it's more, you can say a little bit more secure here than when you're going outside of the States because there's a lot of things that you tend to see and you're like, oh my God, this is very different than what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm. Especially because I think the key of what you said was that you weren't used to that, right? Like, if that was your
Right.
country where you spent all those 23 years, you would have known which streets you can
Yeah.
walk and feel safe, which not, but it takes time. So what happened? How many months did you have to be in Colombia for?
So I originally left in October 27th of 2020. And then I had my immigration interview in November, and then I didn't hear from them until December. But the funny thing about that was that we were kind of like apurados because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, like I was finishing college. So I was still doing my college classes from over there, which was crazy because at the time I had my academic advisors and my counselors, and they're like, hey, how about you take a break because you're going through this whole immigration situation? I was like, no, I want to finish school. Like, I want to be done with
Oh
school.
my
Like,
god.
I don't want to deal with this. And that was kind of like like that's how I would like kind of like preoccupy myself because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I have school. And also my job at the time, because I was working 2 jobs, one of my jobs was like, okay, I'll just send you like work from here. So I was like already working from home, which is funny and ironic because that's what we're doing
It
now.
was
But
pre-pandemic. Yeah, it was perfect.
yeah. And then my other job was like, okay, well, we'll wait for you until you come back to the States because the other one I actually had to be present.
Okay.
And so, November was like when I was like, okay, waiting and waiting because I was initially supposed to graduate in December.
Mm.
And so I still kept waiting and nothing. So then once I heard from them, the day that I actually heard from them was the day that I was supposed to graduate from college.
Mm.
And it was like, it kind of hit me, but I was also like, okay, like this is a good sign. Like we hear from them, but it's also like, wow, like I'm not going to be able to graduate. I'm not going to be able to walk, and I'm not going to be able to do the things that I wanted to do because I also wanted to do it for my family.
That's
But then,
hard.
yeah, so it was hard at first. And then my counselor's academic advisors are like, when you come back, like you can assist, we can like, push your graduation for the next class. And I was like, that's great. But
Mhm.
COVID happened and that too. But I think I look back at it and I'm like, oh my God, that was such a crazy time.
Mm.
But at the same time, it was trying to teach me how to be patient, how to not worry too much about like what is going to happen, and just more of being in the moment of what I'm going through and what is this trying to teach me? What is
Mm.
this trying to put in me? Because before I was so occupied with work, 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 work. And I was like, I didn't know what it was like to have a break. I didn't know. And to me, it's really awkward and weird for me if I'm not busy or if I'm not doing much. If I don't feel like I'm doing much, I feel like I'm not doing much, which is kind of funny, but it's just the way how I am.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, I was like, okay. And immigration was like, okay, we still need a few more documents. I was like, okay, great, fine. January came, and that was when it was like around my birthday time because my birthday is in January. And I was like, okay, great. So my dad was in Colombia, like he flew to Colombia for a month to just stay and vacation. And so we went to this nice little place in Colombia or whatever. And at the time, like my mind was just like, okay, like it is what it is. We gave immigration everything that they want. I can't do anything on my end. I just have to like basically, this is my new life. Like I have to adapt to it. Like, and it's really hard when there's so many changes going on in your life,
So
and you have
hard.
to, yeah, and you have to adapt to your situation regardless of what you want. Because at the time, it's like you feel powerless because you can't really do anything in that situation. You just got to wait on their terms and not on your terms. And so I was like, fine, this is my life and this is what I'm going to do about it. So, I was trying to occupy myself with other things, and I was trying to occupy myself with work that was related from here. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, like when is this going to happen? But I think once you kind of just like let it go, like let go and let God, then that's like when it's like, okay, here you go. Because then a few weeks later, that's when they reached out and they're like, oh, okay, come and pick up your visa. And I was
Oh
like,
my
and I
goodness.
was like, after going through all that, I was like, okay. I was like, great. But in the moment, I think it was still kind of shocked because I was like, whoa, like it's actually here. And it didn't actually hit me once I came back to Chicago and I hugged my mom. And it was like after like 4 months of not seeing her,
Oh my
I was
goodness.
like, it hit me really hard. And I was like, wow, I'm here. And wow, after 16 years of battling this whole situation, it's so mind blowing. But at the same time, it's also like, wow, like I finally have it. But it's something that I've learned, and it's what I was telling my family. Like, it doesn't define you as a person. Like, yes, it's an amazing, and I think it's like such a blessing to be able to have your permanent residency because it's more of a secure feeling. But at the same time, if you look at it, it really doesn't define you as a person because I'm still me. The only thing that just changed was just a few things, but I'm still me. I'm still doing the things that I was doing originally. But I now understand when people are going through certain situations in immigration. I'm like, wow, like I could really reflect, and I was reflecting throughout those months in Colombia, and I was like, wow, like this is what certain people that I know who are undocumented, not even under DACA status, go through. Like, or certain people who have not, I didn't see my mom for months, and that killed me. But I can't imagine not seeing your parents for years. I'm like, wow, like it takes a lot. It takes, and then you start overthinking, and you're like, your situation is not as bad as you would think because there's other people's whose situation are much more, not worse, but much more, I guess, much more problematic to get it all figured out. And I think you have to really be in the moment of the situation that you're in, whether you are okay with it or whether you are not. It's just about adapting to it and what is it trying to teach you.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I know you mentioned that you were a first generation college student, and I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you, what does that mean to you? How can you describe that feeling, what it meant, and some inspiration? Because I know other first generation college students might listen to this, and I know you will inspire a lot of them.
So being a first generation college student, wow, that's a good question. To me, it means that I'm breaking barriers as a Latina, as an immigrant, as someone who thought that college wasn't possible because of my grades. Like if you look at my grades and my GPA in high school, not so good. Um, and to me, it's more of like breaking a barrier
Mm.
and seeing like there is a future of possibilities. I'm also one to say like a college degree doesn't define you as a person, but
Yeah.
to me, it taught me the valuable lesson. Like, okay, I gained knowledge from school. You know, I didn't gain background experience from the real world, but I gained knowledge that I
Mm.
needed to. So I think for anyone out there who's listening and who is either thinking about going to school or not, or if you are going to be a first generation student, really understand like what is your goal behind getting, you know, a degree, because it's not just about like go to school 4 years, get yourself in debt, because that's crazy too,
Yeah.
and you know you get a degree and then you don't end up doing what you want.
Mm.
I always say your parents are always going to be your biggest supporters, but also at the end of the day, you have to take a look at like what is your main goal? Why do you want this degree? What are you
Mm.
trying to do through this degree? What is this going to bring you? Is this going to open bigger opportunities for you? I know that certain careers need to have the requirement of a degree, but I always ask people like, what is your goal behind getting this degree?
Mm.
And if as long as you know your goal, then strive through it. I
Mm.
think take it from someone whose ACT score at the time was really low, and I'm not about to say because it was really bad in high school,
No,
but
but I love it. Yeah, I love that you're being
but I
honest and saying that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, because I was not a good student in high school. I think I was like the worst student because I would never really care about school. And
Mm.
to me at the time, it wasn't a big importance. But when I got to college, I was like, okay, this is a redo. This is like, I can redo this. Like, I can break barriers. I can do this. And I started attending a lot of seminars with like Latinos Unidos and stuff like that, where it was like, you know, Hispanic kids trying to break barriers
Mm.
through college scholarships. And I didn't think I was eligible for a scholarship because I was, at the time, I was under undocumented status. And then I went to DACA. And to me, it was like, well, I didn't think I applied for a scholarship. Y menos con los grados que tenía. So I was like, you know what? To me, it's like showing other people, like, it's an example. It's
Mm.
not something that I'm trying to, like, oh, you know what? I got this and you didn't. No,
Mm.
it's more of like, if I could do it, you can do it. There's no limitations. The only limitation that you put is the one that you put yourself. But I think anything is possible as long as you strive, you work your butt off, and
Mm.
you just like let it go and give it to God. Because if you take a look at anybody's story, my story is my story and that's my power. But if you look at
Mhm.
yourself and you're like, okay, but I'm doing this, I'm doing that, that's your story.
Mm.
That's your power. That's what makes you unique.
Yes.
Embrace that. We
Yes.
need more of that. You know what I mean? So I think to me, being a first generation student was just breaking those barriers in my family as well, because my family was like, I can't really give you much more, but you're going to have to work hard. I
Mm.
had to work 3 jobs to pay off school, you
Mm.
know? And so that was a whole another mess. But at the same time, I
Yeah.
look back and I'm like, it was worth it because they really got me to where I wanted it. And that was my goal. I took a 6 month break from school because I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do.
That's
But
a
when I
good
went
tip.
back,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I know why I'm going back now. And I know what is my goal after I get this. It's
Mm.
not just to have, you know, a degree, but it's like, what is my goal after getting this? And I'm glad to say that I'm one of those people who, you know, has a job within the degree that they got. But I
Mm.
think it just really goes down to what your goal is behind, you know, you getting your degree.
I love it. And could you share with us what's the degree that you got and what are you currently doing?
So I got my bachelor's degree in digital marketing at
Cool.
Northbrook University in Chicago. And I'm currently working behind the scenes of social media marketing. So it's a
Awesome.
blessing in disguise and it's an opportunity. And I'm also, you know, I also work with brands and represent them through marketing campaigns through social media. I've worked with Express, Nike, and stuff like that with influencer marketing. So
How
it's a
cool.
little bit of a mixture of things, but you know, it's something that I really was passionate about and I really saw potential in it, even though at the time when I was, you know, like in
Mm.
school, like there wasn't really a degree for digital marketing. And when I told my counterpart, they're like, hey, we have a program for digital marketing, just opened up. But they're like, but we don't see the potential in it. And I was like, no, I actually do see potential because I think where we're going is everything is going to become digital. But at the
Mm.
time, it was just more of like a theory. But then I was like, no, I actually proved myself wrong. I actually love it. So
Yeah.
I think if you need to take a break from school and figure things out, because my family, who are very Colombian parents, they're like, "Tú estás loca? ¿Qué te pasa? What the hell? Why?" Are you? My dad, who's very Colombian, very strict in school, he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "What are you doing? You're crazy." And I
Mm.
was like, "I need to go to Chicago and figure out what I want to do. I do not want to be in school just to get a degree. And he's like, no, I want you to be in school, because he always wanted me and my sister to be in school and get a degree, because unfortunately he didn't have that opportunity.
Right.
And I was like, Dad, I love you, but like, no, I have to figure out what I want. And when I went to Chicago, my parents really at first were like, nobody's going to give somebody who barely has an associate's degree. And I was like, well, that's okay. I was like, I need to figure out what I want. And, you know, after 100 rejections, because there was 100 rejections of applications, of like, no, there was this one person who said yes. And to her, I'm so thankful, because that was like the beginning of like, oh, okay, I got into social media. And I like didn't really notice that I was good at it until she was like, you're actually good at this stuff. You should major in like marketing or something like that. And I was like, I think you're right. Maybe something in between those lines. But I didn't really know what marketing was. And then I got more into it, and I was like, but I would want it to be digital, because the way how we're going, it's like everything is like circling back to digital and social media. And then when I went back to my school and I told them, hey, I'm under DACA status, I don't know if I apply for scholarships. And I didn't, at the time, the university that I was going to, which is North Park, it's a private school, it's a Christian school. And so it was really expensive. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what's going to happen, because my dad was like, I can't help you more than what I have already helped you with. And I was like, that's okay. And so my mentor counselor, he was like, hey, like, there is actually a scholarship for people who are under DACA status. We love and support people who are under DACA. And then I was just like, bingo. Like, it was a sign from God. Yeah. So I think give your plans to God and let God like try to like, you know, go around about that. Because it's, I think in the moment when you're young, especially like when you're around 20 and 22, those are the, like, I guess those years where it's like you are stressing out because you want to know what is your next move. You are trying to figure things out. And I think like, as I'm 25 now, and there's still times where I'm like, oh my God, I don't have this, I don't have that. But then I look back and I'm like, no, but everything has kind of aligned to itself to where it's going, you know? So I think when you really take a look at like, this is your story, right? This is your personal story, your journey. And I like to use that as a way to connect with people on social media. Like, this is my journey, guys. Okay, like, this is what I went through, and this is what I'm okay with sharing. And I think you have to take a look at yourself and like, you are basically sharing your journey with others, and you be surprised how many people you can touch with just telling them a pinch of your story.
Oh my,
because I didn't really, that was the thing with my immigration story. Like, I didn't think I could share that with people, because I was like, this is embarrassing. At first it was embarrassing, because I was like, I don't think people are gonna like understand this. But then once I started opening up, I was like, wait, there's a lot of people who actually are going through this, or something even much more different than what I was going through. And I'm like, okay, so like, I'm not the only one. And I think you got to get that in your head, that you're not the only one going through this kind of situation.
And that's so powerful. And I appreciate so much that you were willing to share your story with us, because sometimes people they don't believe in the impact that their story is going to have. Like, it's not necessarily that you're going to be teaching someone something, right? I have sometimes people telling me, I don't know if I can share this. It's not even giving a specific message. Is telling your story is already the message, right? Like saying, I went through this and now I'm here, and hey, I'm still figuring out stuff. Like I always say it, I bring to the interviews real people, like people that are maybe telling me today, I haven't made it yet. I'm still struggling with this. I'm still feeling shame. I still have, mental health challenges because of my immigration. But I like hearing those stories because it gives people that connection that we need so much. Like as immigrants, it can be hard. I don't remember the word that you use, but it kind of brings to my, I kind of thinking of like shame somehow, like feeling that shame of like, should I speak up about this? What if they don't understand me? So the fact that you're sharing with us that you sharing your story has made already an impact for those that are going through the same, but also for those that are not, and they can learn from it, and they can say, wow, I had no idea that that was a thing, right? Like, and they can increase their empathy as well.
Yeah. I think if you're going through something like, immigration or anything like that, it's okay. I feel like we are in a society where it makes us feel like, no, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or you shouldn't be seeking help or anything like that. And I am a big believer of therapy, especially coming from a very Hispanic household where therapy was like, well, that's not like what we do. Like, what? Like, that's like a white people thing. And I'm like, no, that's not a white people thing. That's a all of us kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I went to therapy, and I still do every Friday, which has helped me emotionally and mentally. It's helped. And I think if you are open to it, do it. If you're not, don't put the what did he say? Don't put yourself in a box where like you shouldn't be feeling what you feel. Feel what you gotta feel. I always tell people, if you gotta cry, you gotta scream, let it out.
Cry.
Do
Yes.
that. Do it, because I had to cry and let it out. And I was like, why am I feeling shameful after accomplishing a victory? And my family was proud, and everyone around me who knew about like my situation, they were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like now you got, this and blah, blah, blah. But to me, it was very shameful to open up to other people about it. And I had to really like, why am I feeling shameful? This is who I am. This is what's made me me.
Exactly.
And I feel like feel what you got to feel. But the more that you get comfortable with sharing your story, the more that you're going to be able to open up to others about it. And it's not going to look back, and you're going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, I was stressing about this and I was being shameful about this.
And yeah.
But I think you just have to you have to do it on your terms, and you have to be comfortable with like, it is what it is. And this is your story. Just own it. And you never know. Because when I heard your podcast and I told you about this, about Modern Immigrant, I was in Colombia. And I was legit trying to look for a podcast about immigration, and yours popped up, and I was like, okay, like let's click on it. Like I didn't really know there was immigration podcasts, but there are. And when I looked into it, I was like, oh my God, like I'm not the only one going through this kind of situation. I'm not the only one who's been dealing with this behind years, because nobody in my life, only two people in my life who were in my life knew about my situation. And my family, of course, but nobody, not even my close best friends right now, knew about it. When I told them, they were in shock. But I think feel what you gotta feel, and then get comfortable with sharing who you are. I always say it. You are who you bring to the table. So bring that. That's part of your story. Yeah. That's what makes you you. Don't be ashamed of that, because it makes you.
It makes you. And I think that by you sharing this, I think it's important for everyone listening to know that, as you said, do it on your own terms, right? Like do it with the people that you feel like. Maybe start by listening to stories, maybe start by noticing that you're not the only one, and slowly you will be able to open up more and more. Because I do think it's important to also make sure that the person you're sharing the story, like I always feel this space is a very safe space, right? And I recently talked about this in an interview, which was, we don't need to be putting ourselves in spaces that don't want us, right? That are not willing to receive us or listen to us. So do it with people that are kind of going through the same, and maybe follow some of Yessi's advices on also reaching out. If you follow someone on social media that's sharing their story, that's a blogger or that has a podcast, talk to them. They're already creating those spaces, so they will be able to also receive you in that way. So
yeah.
Oh, Yessi, and I can end the interview without before asking you about your own podcast, because I think that was also a cool thing that kind of connected us, and you mentioned about. So share about that, and also share your social media, where I know you're really active, and other people will continue to find inspiration if they check it out.
Yeah, so my podcast is called the Bause It Up. And the meaning behind it was because my brand name is Yessi Bause. And at the time, it was just more of like, I guess it was more of like it was a marketing project that became something much more than that in college, which is something that I mentioned to you. And, at first I was like, okay, well, that's just a marketing project. But my business mentor was like, no, you can actually make this into your brand on social media. And I was like, I have no idea how to do that. And he was like, let's break it down. And so he really guided me and mentored me and gave me the ideas, and like, yo, what if you do this, or what if you do the other? And I was like, ooh. And that I became a blogger at the time, and I was sharing my stories with people, and a lot of people really liked it, and I was sharing a lot of my life as well, so a lot of people really connected with me through that. And throughout the years, I have been able to really work and meet a lot of people within many different industries. And to me, it was like a lot of people on social media, because Snapchat was like my OG.
Nice.
So people would really connect with me on Snapchat at first. And he would be like, oh my God, how did you start working? Because I worked in the entertainment industry. And they're like, how did you get started in the entertainment industry? I was like, oh, like I had a contact and I met this and I met this person and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh my God, like I would love to get experience. And I was like, oh, I can put in good word and I can connect you. And I started doing that, which was kind of funny on Snapchat.
On Snapchat, amazing.
On Snapchat, right? And I feel so bad because I've like abandoned Snapchat so bad lately. But I'm like, I need to go back because I have a big community on there.
Nice.
And to me, it was just like, okay, like I love connecting people and I love introducing people. So to me, it's always like, I think that, I am where I'm at today, not just because of God's like glory, but like also because of the people that God has put in my life and have impacted my life. And when I started to, kind of start in the entertainment industry, it's a, it's a very hard industry, but I learned a lot about connections and about networking and about just kind of like branding myself in a way where I'm like, hi, I'm Yessi Bause and I do this on social media. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Like, do you want to film this? And I got to really, at the time when I was working for the agency that I was working for in Chicago, I got to really meet with like Empire co-stars, if you guys know what the show Empire at the time was at, but I got to really meet them. I got to meet with a bunch of diverse people and it was interesting because it's like how I was telling you, we all have a story. So even working with, actors and celebrities at the time, like they have a story. They have something that you can, in a way or another, you can connect with them. And so to me, it was just more of like, I was just interviewing them. Like, how did you get started in the industry? How did you do this? And blah, blah, blah. And then people started to connect with me more on Instagram because then I started pushing more of my content on Instagram and they're like, oh my God, how do you get started in this industry? Or how do you work in this industry? So, I've had the opportunity and I think that's the beautiful thing about like figuring things out for yourself, like do internships, reach out to people, like create a LinkedIn. LinkedIn will become your best friend to reach out to so many different kinds of people. And I did that and I started reaching out. I didn't have any experience of like how to, send an email, but I was like, yo, like, my name is Yessi.
This is me.
I like what you do. I really want to connect with you. And, I would say also like, look them up, like do your research on them, you know, and like see like where they've been published, if they've been published on Forbes or if they've been published on, any news outlet and tell them like what inspired you from their story. And they're most likely going to respond back. I've never gotten a response where like it hasn't. I mean, here and there I'll be like no responses, but like at the same time I was able to connect with them because they shared something that was from their story.
Yes.
And so then I was like, okay, like so many people are always asking me, how do I do this? Or how do I reach out to this person? And to me, it's like, I've been able to work in so many different kinds of industries. I was like, well, why don't I interview? My first season was interviewing all the people that have, in one way or the other, I've connected throughout the years and they've impacted my career.
Wow.
And so I was like, you know what? I want to do a podcast and I want to talk to people and I want to interview them. And at first it was just an idea and I was like, I don't know where this is going to go, but we'll just go with it. And we just launched it así como si nada.
Yeah.
And we were surprised to see, the amount of people who responded to it so well and the listeners and downloads and the subscribes and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, wow. And we were able to land a 6-month partnership that we have with 2 amazing brands. And I was like, I didn't think that was possible. Like,
amazing.
I didn't, as someone who's starting out, especially in the podcast industry, which is really hard. I was like, I didn't know that was a possibility. But to me, it was like, okay, why bounce it up? Because it's showing up for yourself. And to me, it's like a boss, even though it's like it comes from the word boss, but like to me, it's like boss. It's like you become your own boss by showing up for yourself and not giving yourself, basically neglecting yourself from opportunities that you can create on your own. Because at the time, I didn't really have that much experience. So I was like, hey, I'm going to, create my own opportunities and showcase that to other people. And that's when I started to get introduced to brands and social media and all that stuff. But at the same time, looking back at that, I'm like, this has really, influenced a lot of people. And, this has helped also connect people from different industries. And if I can do that for somebody else, if you've at least impacted one person from it, like you're doing something about it,
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing that was long.
Congratulations on doing that, because it kind of like the podcast and your social media and what you're sharing with your community, it really shows who you are. and the experiences that you have gone through. So I think it just makes sense that you put yourself out there, sharing your story, sharing your experiences, sharing the things that you're doing, because a lot of people feel that fear of sending that email, sending that DM, or reaching out. And I think like we have to start putting ourselves out there with that confidence that you have. I think it's something that I admire from you, and just from your whole story. It's just like believing in who you are and showing up.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want to reach out to someone and it's someone that you really truly do admire, I would say, as someone who's worked in PR too, do your research. Like legit, do your research on the person. Like what news outlets have they been on, or like any podcast episodes that you can probably listen to them. And there has to be something that you kind of like grasp and you're like, oh my gosh, like this really stood out to you. And put that in an email and just say, hey, my name is, blah, blah, blah. I do this, or I'm interested in working in this industry. I would really like your advice or your, tips on how to get started in this industry. People love to talk about themselves when it's their journey, when it's their career journey. And so I think if you got to put yourself in a mindset, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? They don't reply back. Okay, that's okay. Follow up. Like, I think we're so scared to reach outreach, as that's how I'd say it. That's how it's said, outreach through email, because you think you're going to get rejected or you won't get a response. But at the same time, it's like, you got to put yourself out there, because then how else are you going to, reach out to the person that you admire or someone that could give you advice? And to me, it was always like, okay, well, this person has this experience. What can I learn from it? What can what can they give me that will help me? And I think, to me, it was just more of like, you put yourself out there and you never know who that person is and who they can connect you with. And that's what happened to me. Like, I didn't know who that person, like, I knew who they were and I knew what industry they worked, but I didn't know the people that they knew, And so they started putting me in front of those people and they're like, hey, like, this girl knows how to interview and she likes this and blah, blah, blah. What do you think about that? And then I started to talk to people, and I've been, I had to build that confidence, because at first I was not confident at all. And so then now it's like, I think you just have to push yourself, and you just got to tell yourself, that little voice that tells you like, no, don't do it, or no, they're going to reject it. Ignore that sigh. Yeah, ignore it and just put it out there. Even if like with whatever it is your email, I always say, like, as well, try to be professional, but look up templates. I love to follow themuse.com. If you guys are interested, go to themuse.com. They have really good templates on how you can outreach to like people, even people on LinkedIn, like how to send a message on LinkedIn.
I love that. Well, and then people can check out your podcast too to learn more about those amazing, really, people that you have interviewed, to gain some of that inspiration. And I think that it's just so beautiful to hear all of the stuff you have been able to accomplish and that you continue to learn. Really, thank you for sharing it with us. Where can we find you if we want to connect with you? Maybe someone wants to send you an email, a DM, or ask you a question. Where can they find you and your podcast?
Yeah, so if you want to shoot me ever an email, I'm like open to it. I might not respond right away, but I will respond. My email is Yessi, which is like Yes in English and C in Spanish, so YESSI at yessibause.com. And all my social media is Yessi Bause, and my podcast is just called Bause It Up. So that is a little thing.
Yay. Thank you so much one more time, Yessi. I can't wait for people to listen to this episode. I will keep you posted with all the details.
Thank you so much, Vera, for having me. And thank you so much for having me on Modern Immigrant. And I hope that my story and the stories that are on this podcast and the community that you've created for us will be able to help and inspire others who are probably going through something similar or are interested to know more.
I really hope so too, and I'm glad that we're connected now and we can continue to talk and chat through social media, which I think it's a wonderful thing that we have these days. Now that we can't see each other in person much, that's when we need to use it even more. Well, thank you so much one more time.
Thank you.